The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's adoption of California's clean car emission standards has caused consternation among some Minnesotans and raised questions about the scope of an agency's rulemaking authority. In response, Senator Andrew Mathews has proposed the Consumer Choice of Fuel Act, and he joins me to talk more about it. Welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Good to be with you.
Your caucus in particular was not pleased last year when it became known that the Pollution Control Agency planned to adopt California's clean car emission standards. Minnesota was one of about 15 states to adopt some form of the California standards, but the only one in the Midwest. Why are you opposed?
So the main issue between why we are opposed to these rulemaking standards is because I believe these decisions should be made by the legislature. The House and the Senate, we're representing our individual districts from around the state of Minnesota, and we're accountable to the people in our districts. And if I don't make the right decisions, my district can send someone else here in my stead. But an agency doesn't have that level of accountability. They're not up for election, and they've been taking the rulemaking authority that's laid out in statute, and they're stretching the limits. I think they've gone too far beyond what the statute allows them to do. That's what a lot of this debate has centered around. But it comes back to the principle that these decisions should be made by legislators that are accountable to the people.
In committee, you said that the rulemaking process is flawed and that an agency adopting another state's rules, which this is an example of, we're taking California's rules and adopting them here in Minnesota, limits the scope of the conversation. What do you mean?
I think it's flawed because the legislative process, I believe, is more transparent. We have committees that are open to the public. Anyone can come in, and people have come in and spoken both for and against the bill that I've brought forward. We can talk about it in our districts. We have people that are asking about these issues in our districts. And the rulemaking process is not that transparent. They have a few meetings throughout the state of Minnesota, but they don't hit every corner like us legislators do to each corner back home. And I don't see where the agency has really changed their position. I think they came in, already had decided ahead of time what they wanted to do, and went through the motions of a few of these hearings around the state that didn't cover all areas. They didn't come within anywhere close in my district. And they'd already continued to do the decision they, I think, already had in mind ahead of time. So the legislative process is just more transparent, more accessible. Anyone can contact me or my office and share their thoughts, and I listen to my constituents. And I think it is just much more accountable and much more transparent than the rulemaking process is.
Your bill would require that state agencies get legislative approval in order to adopt rules that are coming from another state. So in essence, if this were to happen again, the Pollution Control Agency would come to the legislature and say, hey, we want to adopt California's rule standards, emission standards, and then that would elicit a robust debate. Why is it important? You've already said, but to you it is very important then that the legislature weigh in.
It is, and that's kind of to bring it back to that principle. California has already adopted more rules than what the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has just agreed to adopt by rulemaking. So about the time these rules come into effect, they're already going to be moot because they'll then have to reconsider the new, even greater rules that California has taken a step farther. They've already gone to no gasoline engine vehicles in their state or for sale in their state by 2035. So about the time that the Minnesota rules take effect, they're already going to be moot. We're already going to go through this rulemaking process again. And I think it should come back to the legislature. So if we're going to do it this rules way, I want the legislature to have insight and approval into it. And I hope it points to the fact that these should be policy decisions that we make here in the legislature anyways.
The bill that you're proposing, the Consumer Choice of Fuel Act, if it became law, it would essentially cancel the California standards, which do call for a percentage of vehicles available in Minnesota by 2025 to be low emission or zero emission vehicles. The other thing that it does is it protects consumer choice of fuel on other types of equipment. For example, generators, lawnmowers, boats, and motorcycles. In your view, is this ultimately about consumer choice?
Yes, it is. I think the agencies won't say right now if they're going to try to expand these rules into other areas, into your household items, your lawnmowers and snowmobiles, or to other agriculture, commercial trucks, tractors, and whatnot. And they've always couched those phrases saying, well, we have no plans to do so at this time. And I just have this hunch deep down that one day they probably will take another step into new areas just by rulemaking. And it is about consumer choice. I think consumers should have these decisions to make for themselves. I think the market is growing in these other electric vehicles and other electric options, and I think that is wonderful, and they are already growing right now as we speak. But I don't want this to be a decision done by rulemaking that doesn't have any accountability to it. If it's going to be done, it should be done by legislators like myself that are accountable to our districts.
Well, to the end of choice, proponents of the rule change have said that it was necessary just to encourage more products to become available in Minnesota, the zero emission and low emission vehicles. And one could argue that with the high cost of gasoline right now, there may be a lot more people who are interested in alternative fuel sources. Do you trust that the marketplace will take care of this?
I do. I think the market will respond to the high gas prices. And I think some people will look more at electric vehicles. They are pretty expensive right now, so that is a limiting factor for a lot of people. But I do believe that the market can take care of this. If you go to any dealer, and dealers came in and testified to this and say, we are bending over backwards to try to get an electric vehicle product when we have a customer that wants to come in and buy them, but there's not the demand for it yet that these rules would require the dealers to have in stock and to have on their lots. And so that's going to end up driving the cost up. That'll drive the cost of the rest of their vehicle fleet up when they're forced to have products on that they can't sell. So I believe that the market can help with this. These dealers do want to help their customers when someone comes in and they want to buy one of these vehicles, but it's not wise, in my opinion, to artificially force more products on these lots than the market's ready for right now.
And finally, before we go, one of the roles of the Pollution Control Agency is to regulate air pollution. One of the major contributors to lower air quality comes from the operation of internal combustion engines. Do you think the legislature should be doing more to improve air quality?
I think we can always look at that and look for ways to do more. The statute right now says that the Pollution Control Agency has the authority to regulate the emission levels of vehicles on our roads. And if they had a proposal that just was doing that, to have something to work on the emission levels, that would be one thing. But their rules are going to what products can be bought and sold on these dealer lots.
Senator Andrew Mathews, thank you so much.
Thank you.